Celebrating 45 years on the air, award-winning Farmweek is a production of Mississippi State University Extension.
Today on Farm Week, again after the EPA's stunning reversal, more of our series Voices from the Flood. In Southern gardening, now that Christmas is over, Gary's DIY on Poinsettia Revival. Back on the series, how the 6 stories in our Emmy-nominated series came together. And in the final chapter, in the middle of a catastrophe, a community rising. Farm Week starts right now.
Hello everybody, I'm Mike Russell. Happy New Year, almost. Good to have you with us here on Farm Week. This week, in the wake of the EPA's reversal on flood mitigation pumps in Mississippi's lower delta, we go deeper into this heartbreaking story, how people were reacting as the 2019 floodwaters were rising. Here is part 2 of Voices from the Flood.
You can beat a lot of things, but you can't beat the water. Water's got a mind of its own, and it's going to do what it wants to do. I ain't never seen this much water in my life. Everywhere you look, nothing but water. It look like an ocean.
They built all the backwater levees and basically built a bowl with no drain except Still Bayou, which can't drain when the river's high.
We had the right amount of rainfall, we had the river high, we had the gates closed. Everything just went perfect in that equation to create a man-made disaster.
When they shut those gates and it started to rain, we were in trouble.
We sandbag and we pump. That's what we fight every year. We won the battle in 2018 and then 19 hit. And there was no winning that battle.
My husband told me, he said, we're going to flood. And I didn't think a whole lot about it because we always get some water in our fields. We live in the Delta. It's part of life. And he told me, you don't understand, it's gonna be really bad.
It just was constant rain after rain through November and December. When things start coming up on flooding and flood issues and warnings, I get daily emails of conditions and what the backwater is expected to go to. And one of our big things is the gates, we call it, down at the Still Bayou structure, when they close and when will they open. We usually get these things, you know, in April. And we started getting these emails in January.
I had said for weeks, if they say it goes north of 95, I'm building a levee around the house. I remember people stopping and asking me, do you really think it's going to get that bad? Well, you know, I hope not. I hope I'm doing this for nothing, but I know what it's capable of. I know what can happen. Before it was over, I was afraid I hadn't built the thing tall enough.
You'd get a report and say, okay, well, it's going to crest at this. The next day it comes the rain and they say, oh, it's 2 foot higher. You know, you build levees around people's homes, and the next thing you know, you have to go back and add to them because that's not high enough.
For the first time, probably since the 1971 flood, the backwater actually overtook Highway 465 and cut the lake off completely. So that was in early March, like the first week in March. And of course from there, it was just watching the water rise.
I remember being at home one afternoon and it rained all day. I had already built a levee around the house and I thought it would keep it back until it stopped raining. But the more it rained, the higher it got.
I think March the 8th, the Board of Supervisors issued a mandatory evacuation, and that didn't end until sometime 169 days later.
by March 16th, we were boating from our house to the roads. A lot of people, it sounds real romantic, you know, boating back and forth to your house when you don't know, but it's not.
In April, you know, it started overtaking one of the major roads in our community, which is Eagle Lake Shore Road. The community started fighting it, sandbagging that road, and held it at bay for almost 2 months.
Everybody had levees around their house, but the levees were gonna seep. Water was gonna seep through them, so we all had, pretty well everybody had electric sump pumps.
Everybody had a generator, so as soon as it started raining, it didn't matter what time of night, day or night it was, you got up and waited in case the power went off, because if the power went off during a hard rain, you didn't have just a matter of minutes.
When I got up at 2 o'clock in the morning, I was kind of checking the pumps and stuff, the water was coming down through the hallway. I mean, I had to rush my son out to bed, get him up, and we couldn't, practically get nothing. And when we got to the car, the water, I didn't know it had rose that much. The water was up to my bumper of my car, and I just did get it out of there.
West of Highway 61, it was backwater everywhere. And as the further you went south, especially when you got to Cary, then it started looking like oceans.
As the water, came up, I saw a lot of things change. We saw people's houses going underwater. Tremendous amount of roads in this county went underwater, and that changes people's lives.
The lake and the backwater equalized. The lake rose about 8 feet in 3 days and got into people's homes. That was the beginning of the end for us.
I found it just made my mind up. I'm gonna pack what I can get and I'm gone. The heat and the humidity in my house, it just ruined everything that I left inside the house. Some of the stuff I had just recently purchased in the house. I lost all that. I really did, and that hurt. It really hurt.
My son, he built his house up a little higher, and he almost made it until that last 8-inch rain we got. He lost not only his home, but they lost all their belongings.
It got up to my waist in the house. Coming so fast, I had to go. I told my wife, I said, we just want to get out because we can't stop it. Well, I sure didn't want to go, but I ain't have no choice.
In Sharkey County, we had 86 households displaced in the county. Some people just didn't have much. They didn't have flood insurance, and they lost everything. They lost everything.
We'll continue our series in just a couple of minutes. But first, if you're like me, you've wondered if you can somehow preserve this Christmas beauty and save it for next year. Well, with a little TLC, it's possible. Here's Gary.
Many of us had a beautiful poinsettia for the Christmas holidays. These gorgeous plants can certainly brighten a dreary weather-wise part of the year. Now what? Do you keep it or toss it? Let me share some tips for enjoying your poinsettia year-round. First, put your poinsettia in a warm, sunny window and water normally. As far as temperature is concerned, if you're comfortable, your poinsettia will be too. Temperatures below 60 degrees can cause leaf drop. Remember, these are tropical plants native to Mexico. In spring, start decreasing watering and allow to dry out a bit. Cut the stems back to about 4 inches. Don't worry, it will grow back, and repot into a bigger container. When night temps stay above 60 degrees, move outside. The poinsettia will love your porch or patio. Remember to water and fertilize as needed. Prune the stems back 1 to 2 inches a couple of times during the summer to promote bushier growth. When night temperatures start hitting 60 in the fall, bring the plant back inside. Now comes the fun part. Can you make your poinsettia bloom for Christmas? Beginning October 1st, use a box to cover and keep your plant in total darkness for 14 continuous hours every day for at least 6 weeks. There's no guarantee, but hopefully it will be ready for Christmas. If not, I will guarantee there'll be plenty of colorful poinsettias to pick up at your local garden center to enjoy. I'm horticulturist Gary Bachman, and I'll see you next time on Southern Gardening.
We'll take a break right here, but don't go away. Coming up in our Farm Week feature, we conclude our series, Voices from the Flood. Up to now, you've heard all about the widespread destruction of this massive flood of Mississippi's South Delta, but we'll end on an up note. In Part 5, you'll hear about resilience and human spirit, about gratitude for people coming together to help their fellow citizens. It will move you. A community rising, the conclusion of Voices from the Flood, coming up on Farm Week. Don't go away.
Hi, I'm Jonah Holland, and I'm a communication major at Mississippi State University. As a college student, I'm young and generally pretty healthy. I try to take care of myself, but the coronavirus, especially the Delta variant, doesn't care about that. It's putting both young and healthy people alike in the hospital, not just older, sicker people. The best defense we have is the COVID-19 vaccine, and the first one has just received full approval from the FDA. Billions of people around the world have received it, and the science shows it is safe and effective. Right now, in Mississippi, more than 85% of people in the hospital with COVID are unvaccinated. 85%. Think about that. So don't wait. Talk to your doctor or pharmacist, get the facts you need, and get the vaccine. You'll be a hero.
As extension professionals, we have a creed, words that mean a lot to us. It says we believe in people's right to make their own decisions, and we do.
It also says we believe that people, when given facts they understand, will act not only in their self-interest, but also in the interest of others.
That's why we want to make sure that you have the facts about the COVID vaccine.
Fact, the Delta variant is dangerous. It's more than twice as contagious as the original coronavirus.
Fact, in Mississippi, more than 85% of the deaths from COVID-19 have been among unvaccinated people.
The vaccine is not 100% effective at preventing all infection. No vaccines are, but it can save your life. And that, my friends, is a fact.
So get the facts you need and get the vaccine.
You'll be a hero.
Back on our encore report, Voices from the Flood, we thought it might be a good idea to give you an inside look at how that series came to pass. It's a behind-the-scenes view that, given the severity and duration of the flooding, we felt especially relevant.
It was intense.
Yeah.
It was 2 very intense days.
That was the reaction Carrie Lewis had to interviewing 19 Mississippians earlier this year, all of them victims of the Yazoo backwater flood of 2019. Carrie was part of a team from Mississippi State collecting video interviews for an oral history of the flood that, when finished, will be placed permanently in the university's Mitchell Memorial Library.
These oral history transcripts we're hoping will fit into this broader narrative of the flood, because there will be EPA documents and Army Corps of Engineer documents and weather reports and all kinds of things that can talk about what happened to the physical environment, but only the people who lived through it, boating to and from their homes and taking their dogs on a boat out so they could walk in different places where there wasn't water, or having to go get groceries and drive 70 miles out of the way just to get to the grocery store. Those kinds of details will be lost to history if we don't talk to the people who experienced them.
I felt like, their story really needed to be told.
Producer-videographer Brian Utley was also part of the interview team. He quickly realized the flood story would also mean a lot to the Farmweek audience.
Honestly, I knew that we were sitting on something as we sat there and kept interviewing that we could do something different with and further with to help tell this story. You can tell when something is just really real and raw and heartfelt, whatever you want to say, and I picked up on that real quick after even just a couple of interviews.
Once the interviews were shot, it wasn't long before the COVID-19 pandemic struck, and for a time, many at Mississippi State were in lockdown, including Brian. But believe it or not, this turned out to be a silver lining where the flood story was concerned.
I was at home, and this was the one project that I had shot at the moment. There was no going out and shooting other projects that were coming up. Everyone was grounded. So this is what I had, and it was hours and hours and hours of, interviews. Well, I had time, and that's when I really got into this thing and learned, because I rewatched these interviews.
The lockdown gave Brian that luxury of time, and it became apparent that the Yazoo flood was a complicated and emotional story. It would take time to sort through the interviews and to shoot more footage to bring the story to life. Brian went back later for that. In the meantime, an army of still photographers and amateur shooters volunteered their imagery. Ultimately, the series emerged, as did the heartfelt emotions of those who shared their stories on camera.
Most people were very candid, were happy to be there to share what they had experienced. I think some were surprised by how emotional they got. And as someone who was listening to them talk about how their lives had changed, what they had learned about themselves, it was very humbling. I felt very honored that they would trust us enough to talk so openly and share what they went through. It was traumatic.
I've seen it over and over, but man, it still hits me when I play it. Some of the things that are said. With that supervisor saying, one thing he can say about the people here is that they will endure. That's powerful. And really, that's the heart of Mississippians, in my opinion.
Up to now, in Voices from the Flood, we've told you all about the disaster of Mississippi's South Delta. Now we conclude the series in an uplifting way. From producer Brian Utley, inspired himself by the struggle of his fellow Mississippians, we bring you the final installment of the story subtitled A Community Rising.
Mississippi in general is a great place, but it's hard to beat little country towns. I've been here all my life, and everybody knows me, and I know everybody. And we all try to help one another. It's kind of like a Mayberry, I guess you could call it. When something like this happens, people come from everywhere, to help.
We had sandbagging operations, and I don't know, we did thousands and thousands of sandbags. But the neatest thing was it was never an issue about help.
We got on Facebook one day and they were saying, we need people sandbagging at the elevator. Next thing I know, we're down there, we've got over 30 trucks out there, and it is serious. Everybody's doing manual labor.
Here you are, a librarian, and I'm out there, filling up sandbags day after day. And there were people that were in their 70s and 80s, and we just could not believe what workers this community had.
We bagged almost 6 miles of road. I've lived all over the state, and some of the nicest people and helping people that I've lived anywhere.
Me being a deputy, I was out in the middle of it. I got to see communities come together. I saw kids from Vicksburg, I saw kids from Rolling Fork, coming from Greenville, helping. And not only kids, people. If they couldn't fill a sandbag, they were bringing cookies, they were bringing sandwiches, water, whatever. It was an experience that I'll remember the rest of my life.
Even though we were all hurting and all needing some help, we still found ways to give. We had people calling in donations to where we could feed families that were flooded out. Just some loving people that loved on us and helped us through.
We had people come from South Mississippi that had no connections to this community at all, but they came and worked hard.
The human spirit is good. I think that's a natural God-given instinct, is to help your neighbors, to be good people. Someone told a guy an hour away from here that I was having trouble with my levee, and he found out I was in trouble, and he said, when it's dry enough to haul dirt, you call me and I'm gonna send an excavator and a dump truck. And so he, I get emotional thinking, I didn't know him from Adam. He just knew we needed some help.
People were checking on us every day, every day. I really didn't know the Valley Park community very well. I mean, I knew like on an acquaintance, but man, there's some good folks around us. Really good folks.
She gave me these jeans they got on now. They gave my daughter some clothes. I don't know her name. She the vet I go to. She helped. I appreciate that.
When you see people that you've grown up with, I've grown up with a lot of these older people. They treated me like they were their own. We pulled up and Mr. Percy's yard was still dry. So we pulled up in the boat. He gets out, he has his old black rubber boots on, his breeches tucked down in his boots. And he looked like somebody that had never been there since he was a kid. He goes to the front yard of the house, and there's a swing in the front yard. And when he gets there to that swing, he spins around and he sits down and he puts his arm up on the back of that swing like it was dry ground everywhere and he was at home.
I've seen a picture of you that I think...
Sitting in a swing.
Yeah, is it Mr. Way?
Mr. William and Ed.
Yeah.
All of us together then.
That's quite a picture.
Yeah.
That was one of the best moments that you could see somebody so happy to get home. He said, Eddie, this is all I got. I got to come home.
I did hear this comment out of some people, well, if y'all been through this, why do you keep going back? Why do you not just leave, And that's probably the one thing that I wish people had a better understanding of what home is. That home is hard to get past that.
I've got a T-shirt made that said, why don't you just move? And I say, this is my home and moving's not an option.
It's home, and it's always gonna be home. Whether we have to fight the flood every year or whether they come in and help us, it's still gonna always be home.
What's the most important thing you wish people knew about the flood?
I wish they knew how emotional, I call it, if you've been in war and everything, you have PTSD, or a lot of first responders have it because of stuff they've seen. I have PTSD, post-traumatic flood disorder.
Mainly the biggest things that I want to be told about the flood is the forming of the Finish the Pumps. The people who came together to stand up united, who wanted their story told.
I don't think people quite understand when you really put your voice out there, you can make a difference. You can.
If those pumps would have been in place, we still would have a flood, but not near the magnitude of water and the devastation to the farming, to the people, to the wildlife.
in Sharkey County, we wouldn't have had a county road go under. We wouldn't have had one home displaced.
A lot of my friends, they call it the forgotten backwater flood. I don't dwell on the past or worry about it. I learn from it, hopefully, and go forward. There's nothing I can do about the past.
There's a time to just sit down and realize just what really is important. You flood, you lose your stuff. And that's what it is, it's just stuff.
We're gonna make it. God will take care of us.
I would like to say that the people here endure.
Never underestimate the power of the human spirit. Well, next week, a story about the impact of a virus. It's not COVID, but some are concerned that brucellosis, the bacteria that affected U.S. cattle herds in the last century, long thought to be eradicated, may be coming back, this time in elk and wild hogs. The bacteria is also on a federal list of bioterrorism agents, though there's more to that story. Concern about brucellosis, that's next time on Farm Week. Remember, if you missed a story, look for past episodes of Farm Week on our website at farmweek.tv. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.